The sun crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the highway just outside Jaipur. On his black Royal Enfield, Raghav Shekhawat moved like he was part of the machine, a seamless extension of steel and power. Behind him, his daughter Arohi held on tight, her laughter stolen by the wind. These morning rides were their ritual, a race against time itself, a father and daughter carving out moments of pure freedom. At 42, Raghav was a retired army mechanic with the quiet strength of a man who had seen the world. He now ran a garage called Iron Soul. It was more than a business. It was a sanctuary where engines roared, stories were told, and a brotherhood bound by oil and loyalty gathered. This was his world. Arohi, at 18, was on the cusp of her own journey. She was sharp, gentle, and ambitious, so much like her late mother. The day before, her acceptance letter to Delhi University had arrived, a single white envelope that shifted their entire world. Raghav had held her close, his pride a palpable force. "Your road starts here, Betty," he'd whispered. "Ride it fearless." That evening, Iron Soul came alive. The Brotherhood threw a small celebration under the flickering garage lights. Tork, Raghav's closest friend, a mountain of a man with a heart to match, raised his bottle. "To Arohi, who's going places, and to Ryder, the man who taught us all how to keep balance, on the road and in life." Laughter and stories filled the night, tales of near misses and hard-won miles. But beneath Raghav's smile, a quiet unease settled in. He knew the world's true dangers rarely announce themselves. Still, he let the joy of the moment wash over him. Arohi danced with Tork's little niece, her laughter echoing through the open garage. As the night wound down, Raghav stood outside, watching the empty moonlit road. A cool breeze brushed his face, calm, familiar, and deceptive. He took a deep breath, unaware that this peace was about to shatter. For a brief, perfect moment, with the engine silent and his daughter's laughter still in the air, everything felt right. But the road always has its own plans, and sometimes it leads you straight into a storm. The next morning, Jaipur was a symphony of chaos, horns, vendors, and a haze of morning dust. Arohi, buzzing with excitement for her college orientation, dressed with care. Raghav watched from the doorway, a proud smile masking a father's worry. He handed her the keys to the scooter they had fixed up together. "Ride safe," he said, his voice firm. "And remember, the road listens only to respect." She hugged him, and with a final wave, disappeared into the city's hum, riding unknowingly toward a different kind of danger. At the college, the air was electric with nervous energy and new beginnings. Leaning against an expensive car, exuding an air of unearned confidence, was Aditya Malhotra, the senator's son. His eyes, hidden behind sunglasses, scanned the crowd and landed on Arohi. Her quiet grace intrigued him. Her lack of interest in him sealed it. He approached her with practiced charm, but his compliments quickly turned into persistent, uncomfortable advances. Arohi's polite refusals only fueled his arrogance. Later that afternoon, as the campus emptied, she stood by the parking lot, calling Raghav to say she'd be late. That's when Aditya cornered her again. The charm was gone, replaced by raw entitlement. He grabbed her wrist. "Do you know who I am?" he hissed, his voice laced with menace. The world seemed to fade around them. Arohi fought back, her voice trembling but defiant. In the struggle she fell, scraping her arm, but managed to break free and run. Hours later, she arrived home, her clothes dusty, her eyes swollen with unshed tears. The moment Raghav saw her, his world stopped. The sight of his daughter, trembling and broken, shattered something deep inside him. He listened to her story, each word a blade twisting in his gut. By the time she finished, his knuckles were white, his grip tight on the edge of the table. That night, Raghav, with Arohi and Torki by his side, went to the police station. He expected justice. He found a wall of indifference. The officer's eyes darted away the moment he heard Aditya's name. "Sir, these are sensitive matters. The boy is from a powerful family. We'll handle it internally." Raghav's control snapped. His voice rose, shaking with a rage he hadn't felt in years. But Tork put a hand on his shoulder. a silent warning. Not here, brother. Not yet. They left with nothing but the bitter taste of injustice. Under the flickering streetlights, Raghav's face was a mask of calm, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. The system he'd taught his daughter to trust had failed her. As they rode home, Arohi held on to him, her quiet sobs lost to the wind. For the first time in a long time, Raghav's hands trembled on the handlebars. The road ahead was no longer about freedom. It was a battlefield waiting for the first shot. The next morning, a heavy silence hung over Iron Soul. The familiar roar of engines was replaced by a tense quiet. Raghav worked mechanically, his hands busy but his mind miles away, replaying the previous night's failure. Arohi sat inside, staring into her untouched tea, her silence a scream of its own. Torka was the first to arrive. He took one look at Raghav's face and didn't need to ask. When Raghav finally spoke, the words were clipped, bitter. As he explained what had happened, what the police had said, Torka's expression hardened into granite. Soon, the rest of the Brotherhood filed in, their leather jackets and heavy boots filling the space. They were men of the road, men who understood that some fights have to be fought outside the lines. They listened as Raghav laid out the facts, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. They silenced the police. He finished. They think their power makes them untouchable. They think we'll just stay quiet. A thick, charged silence filled the garage. Then Tork spoke, his voice resonating with conviction. We don't ride for fun, brother. We ride for those who can't fight the road alone. A series of slow, determined nods rippled through the group. Their loyalty wasn't declared in words. It was forged in steel and tested over thousands of miles. That evening, Raghav went to the senator's mansion alone. It was a fortress of arrogance, with high gates and armed guards. He was denied entry, laughed at. Then the senator himself appeared, his smile polished and empty. "I'm sorry for your distress," he said, his voice dripping with condescending sympathy. "But misunderstandings happen. Let's not blow this out of proportion." Raghav's fists clenched, but he held his ground. He looked the senator dead in the eye. "You raised a monster," he said, then turned and walked away, the guard's laughter echoing behind him. He returned home to find Iron Soul in ruins, windows shattered, walls spray-painted with threats. His tools, his life's work, scattered like broken bones, and scrawled in red paint across the main shutter, "Stay quiet if you love your daughter." The Brotherhood was there within the hour. They stood amidst the wreckage, their faces grim. Tork stared at the graffiti, his eyes burning with cold fury. "They brought the war to your doorstep, brother." Raghav's gaze fell on a photograph of Arohi, her smiling face now framed by shattered glass. In that moment, something inside him, the soldier, the father, the man who believed in order, finally broke. He turned to face his brothers, his voice steady, devoid of all emotion but resolve. "If the system won't bring justice," he said, "then the road will." The silence in the ruined garage was no longer one of grief. It was the calm before a storm of thunder. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the deeper side of the human spirit. We'll see you in the next one. The morning after, a heavy silence settled over Iron Soul Garage. The usual symphony of engines was gone, replaced by an unspoken weight in the air. Raghav worked alone, his hands moving with the mechanic's precision over a carburetor. But his mind was miles away. Arohi hadn't said a word since last night. She sat inside, staring into her cold tea, her eyes holding a vacancy that screamed louder than any shout. Tork was the first to arrive, his heavy boots echoing on the concrete floor. One look at Raghav's tense shoulders was all he needed. "What happened?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Raghav didn't answer immediately. He wiped grease from his hands with a rag, his jaw tight as if the words themselves were too bitter to speak. When he finally recounted the events of the previous night, Tork's weathered face hardened into a mask of cold fury. By noon, the rest of the Brotherhood had arrived. They were brothers forged in leather and steel, each a man who had wrestled with the world and won. As Raghav spoke, the garage filled with a low, rumbling anger. No one interrupted. The only sound was the rhythmic creak of Tork's leather glove tightening into a fist. They silenced the police. Raghav finished, his voice barely a whisper. They think they can erase it. They think we'll just stay quiet. A long, dangerous pause hung in the air, charged with unspoken promises. Then Tork spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. We don't ride for fun, brother. We ride for those who can't fight the road alone. Heads nodded in solemn agreement around the room. Their loyalty wasn't loud. It was built from steel and tested in storms. That evening, Raghav went to the senator's mansion alone. The house stood like a fortress, protected by tall gates, armed guards, and an aura of untouchable arrogance. He demanded to see Aditya, but the guards just laughed at him. When the senator himself appeared, he wore a politician's smile, polished, empty, and venomous. "I'm sorry for your distress," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But misunderstandings happen. Let's not blow things out of proportion." Raghav's fists clenched at his sides, but he held his temper in check. He looked the senator dead in the eye and said, "You raised a monster," then turned and walked away. The guards shoved him as he left, their laughter echoing behind him all the way to the gate. When he returned home, he found his garage in ruins. The windows were shattered, the walls were spray-painted with slurs, and his tools were scattered like broken bones. A single message was scrawled in red paint across the shutter. "Stay quiet if you love your daughter." Within the hour, the Brotherhood gathered amidst the wreckage. Tork stared at the destruction, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "They brought war to your doorstep," he said, his voice low and grave. Raghav's gaze fell on a photograph of Arohi on his workbench, her bright smile now framed by dust and broken glass. Something inside him, the soldier, the father, the man who once believed in the law, began to shift. He turned to his brothers, his voice steady but cold as ice. "If the system won't bring justice," he declared, "then the road will." And in that moment, the heavy silence of the garage transformed into the promise of thunder. The night sky hung low over the city, thick with dust and the threat of rain. Inside the broken shell of Iron Soul, the Brotherhood gathered once more. Helmets lined the walls, their polished surfaces flickering in the dim workshop light. Raghav stood in the center, his gaze fixed on the twisted frame of a bike that had once belonged to Arohi's late mother. It had always been a symbol of resilience. Now it looked like a promise demanding to be fulfilled. Tork broke the silence. "We can't just sit here, Ryder. They think we're nothing, just men who ride fast and talk loud. Let's show them what brothers on wheels can do." Murmurs of agreement rumbled through the group. But Raghav didn't respond right away. His years in the army had taught him that anger without direction destroys more than it avenges. "We don't burn roads without a reason," he said quietly. "We find the truth first. Then we make them face it." That decision marked the beginning of something larger than revenge. The Brotherhood split into small, efficient groups. One team started tracing Aditya's movements, another reached out to potential witnesses from the college, and a third began tracking down deleted security footage. They used old contacts, street informants, and the invisible network of bikers that stretched across the city like veins of asphalt. Days blurred into nights filled with the hum of restless engines and whispered meetings in shadowy alleyways. The bikers moved like ghosts, not as thugs, but as soldiers fighting for truth. They found the campus guard who'd seen Aditya drag Arohi behind the parking shed. They convinced a frightened student to hand over a fragment of video she'd salvaged from her phone before the senator's men wiped it clean. Each piece of evidence brought them closer to the truth and closer to danger. Raghav barely slept. The warmth in his eyes had been replaced by a steady burning focus. Tork noticed the change, but didn't question it. "You're riding a fine line, brother," he warned one night. Raghav replied without looking up from a city map, "Justice is never a straight road." The senator's men attacked again, this time at midnight, throwing stones and shouting threats. They didn't expect the bikers to be waiting. Engines roared to life like a sudden clap of thunder, and in the chaos that followed, no blood was spilled, But every attacker was disarmed, their vehicles overturned, their pride crushed beneath spinning wheels. The message was clear: we are not afraid. After the dust settled, the Brotherhood released the recovered footage online under a single powerful caption: "Truth rides with us." Within hours, it ignited a firestorm of outrage across social media. The senator's office descended into panic. The story could no longer be buried. Back at Iron Soul, Raghav stood among his brothers, their faces illuminated by the glow of a dozen bike headlights. The war had begun, not a war of violence, but of will. And though the night was far from over, for the first time in days, the road ahead didn't look dark, it looked ready. By dawn, the city was buzzing. The video had spread like wildfire, forcing news outlets to break their silence. Protesters filled the streets, and the senator's carefully crafted image began to crack under the pressure of the truth. Yet Aditya Malhotra remained hidden, shielded by his father's influence and guarded by men who believed fear was stronger than justice. Raghav knew the storm was far from over. Inside Iron Soul, the Brotherhood gathered around a makeshift map of the city. Torque reported quietly. They've moved him to one of their warehouses near the ring road, guarded, but not invisible. Raghav's eyes were steady. Then that's where the road ends, he said. That night, a convoy of bikes cut through the sleeping city, their headlights carving lines of defiance in the darkness. The sound of their engines wasn't just noise, it was a declaration. When they reached the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of rust, oil, and fear. Aditya's guards stepped forward, shouting threats that were swallowed by the growl of engines. The bikers advanced, not recklessly, but with the chilling precision of veterans. Inside, Raghav found Aditya, his arrogance still intact, though fear trembled just beneath the surface. "You think you can touch me?" he sneered. "My father will—" The words were cut short as Raghav's fist connected, not with wild fury, but with the cold weight of a man demanding justice. Aditya stumbled back, cornered. "You destroyed my daughter's peace," Raghav said, his voice a low growl. "You thought your name would hide your sins, but the road remembers every scar." His brothers stood behind him, a silent wall of leather and steel. Aditya, bleeding and shaken, spat. "You'll go to prison for this." Raghav stepped closer. "If I kill you, I become you. My fight isn't for revenge, it's for truth." He tossed a small active camera to the ground. "Say it," he ordered. Fear finally shattered Aditya's composure. The confession spilled out, drenched in panic and guilt. The moment the truth left his lips, police sirens pierced the night. Just as the authorities arrived, the bikers vanished into the darkness, leaving only the recording behind. As Raghav rode into the dawn, the first rays of sunlight broke across his face. His knuckles ached, his heart was heavy, but his soul felt lighter. The road ahead stretched, uncertain yet peaceful. Behind him, the city awakened to the sound of truth, a noise louder than engines and stronger than fear. The battle was over, but the reckoning had just begun. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you believe in fighting for what's right, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Ride safe and always stand for truth.